Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Thursday night. It is good to see you, and it is good to be seen by you. I hope you're all having an absolutely wonderful time. I, of course, am Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you live from an undisclosed location somewhere in the swamps of Central Florida. And I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic evening. We're just rolling along with a great week of great guests. Last night we had T-shirted historian on, and we had a lot of fun talking to him. Of course, the big news today was WotC announced their new president of the company, basically. Well, I guess I should say Hasbro have a new president for Wizards of the Coast. I did a whole video about that. I'm not going to throw ashes on my head or rend my shirt or anything like that. We're just going to wait and see. We're going to wait and see what happens. In 6 months, we could be right back to where we were in January of 2023. Who knows? But you can go check that video out. It's not linked below, but it's on my channel. So hopefully you'll scope that out. Wheeling Dragon, hello. Good to see you. But tonight we have guest on. He's a great guy. This guy, and of course, you saw the thumbnail and read the description. But the dude is a giant in tabletop RPG design, by which I mean he's like 3+1 hit dice. Okay, and the guy could look a bugbear in the eye and stare him down. But I met this cat last year. In the virtual sense, and then in the real sense, we bumped into each other at GaryCon. I survived that, by the way. But anyway, he's a good guy and a lot of fun to talk to. And we're going to hold forth on RPG topics that interest us. And if you guys have got any questions, any comments you want to throw in the chat, you just feel free to light us up and let us know. And we'll do our level best to answer you. So please, everyone, put your hands together for my guest this evening, Stephen Radney-MacFarland. Steve, how are you, sir?
Good. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. I can't complain. I mean, I could, but nobody would listen. So anyway, man, it's good to see you again. It's been a minute or two.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. So at the risk of being a little cliche, what's new? How are you? Did you get to GaryCon this year? I unfortunately did not.
Yeah, I did get to GaryCon this year. It was a lot of fun. It was very busy. The tables were crowded. I was there running Delve. In fact, I got to run a game for my old boss over at Paizo, Eric Mona. So that was
nice.
Fun. And a lot of friends and new people came to play that game. So yeah, it was and I got to my friend David Christ, who's Ball Guy Games, and my friend Rob Odine, we all kind of shared a place that was a little bit off campus so we could go hide, and played a great Call of Cthulhu game in the off hour. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And
that's great. Good.
Yeah, no, and we missed you being there. So
yeah, maybe someday I can get back up there. I got Heidi Gygax Garland and Eric Garland are trying to get me to come up to next year's EggCon, which I really want to do. So that that's they do that around Gary's birthday, which is coming up this weekend. Right. Yeah. That's going to be a big thing. And for those of you watching out there, I've got an announcement coming on that day, so stay tuned. But But anyway, yeah, I would love to make it back up to another Gary Con, because it is a very laid back atmosphere, and I like it a lot. I was there in 2018. We didn't know each other at the time. And then of course, last year my wonderful folks in my audience got me got me and the missus up there. Um, so yeah, going back is definitely on my to-do list. But it sounds like you had a blast. So you got some Call of Cthulhu in, you say?
Yeah, my friend James Lauder ran a group of us in the off hours through an adventure that he wrote, and so we had a great time going insane. Um, and this place I thought I could put tables together, but then I found out that one of the tables was attached to the wall. So we scoot around the living room stuff and brought in the dining room table and had a very
There
fun
you
time
go.
with Steve Sullivan, and who else was it? Was like a kind of a lot of folks that used to work at TSR.
Yeah.
And very, very fun game.
You know what? One of the coolest things, and I have found this to be so true, is being an RPG geek. Our heroes are so darn approachable. I mean, come on, if you were just strictly a guitar head, what are the odds you're just going to be able to stroll up to Jimmy Page or Neil
Right.
Young or Eric Clapton and just shoot the shit with them and say, hey, you want to sit down and do a little chicken picking? And they've got like layers of people. But I when I was at Gary Con year before last, I sought out Alan Hammock and just like geeked out and sat in the room where he was running Ghost Tower of Inverness, and I'd had him on the show a few times before, so it was an expected meeting, but it was just like and I love that about this hobby. It is rare, and it's rare enough that you don't worry about it, that there's me designer, you little people attitude out of people.
So locally, I live in the Seattle area, and we have a mostly historical, but just miniatures wargaming club.
Uh-huh.
And Zeb Cook moved out here to be closer to his family, and he's part of our club. And so last year, I started. I met Zeb Cook. Well, I met him when I was younger at a convention and everything else, but of course. And so getting to know Zeb has been an absolute treat. And, and playing games with him is just a blast. And his wife is really fun person. She's got a wicked sense of humor. So yeah, it's one of those things where I'm a big fan of Zeb's writing, and have been for a long time. And it's one of the, don't meet your heroes, they say, and it's all like, well, yeah, Zeb's awesome.
yeah, no, I everybody I've met to do with RPGs, anything I've enjoyed. You mentioned Call of Cthulhu. Sandy Peterson has been on the show a couple of times, and have you met Sandy?
Briefly once, a while back.
The thing that I loved about Sandy is Sandy is one of us, dude. He's absolutely one of us.
Well, I mean, so not talking about C-suite stuff, but if you're going to work in games and your main job is the creation of games, you've got to be one of us, right?
Of course.
You absolutely have to be. And so it's so much, it's so much fun working at Wizards and then at Paizo and everything else. Everybody I worked with was just a huge gaming geek of one sort or another, and usually, a good mix of both. I love I've been painting World War II miniatures lately, which I've never really wanted to do, but
right.
But there's this new game from Studio Tomahawk, and I love Studio Tomahawk. They're one of my favorite design studios out there. And so, and I'm finding out painting World War II miniatures isn't nearly that bad.
Excellent. That is awesome, man. That's really great. And it's so cool. And I'm not gonna lie and say I don't envy you getting to hang out with Zeb Cook. I mean, here's a guy. His stuff is like right here. I am pointing at the magenta and turquoise D&D sets that we all bought at the toy store or the model train store back in the 80s when we were kids, and we get to hang out with those people, and I just think that's the the coolest thing, again, because there is no, no, please stay behind the velvet rope and don't speak to Mr. Cook, Gygax, whoever. And that's what's so wonderful about this hobby. There was a sadly never released documentary about the history of D&D, and it really became more of a movie about Gary and Dave. It was to be called The Great Kingdom. Did you ever see the trailer for that?
I saw the trailer for that. That looked really interesting. I was wondering why.
Yeah. I think it probably somebody has got to pick up the ball on that and do it justice one day. But the takeaway is not to dwell on a film that didn't happen. Although I do recommend, if you haven't seen it, Dreams in Gary's Basement by Pat Kilbane.
Pat's a friend of mine. In fact, he was in that Call of Cthulhu game that I was talking about.
Well, there you go. Yeah, Pat's awesome, dude.
And his documentary. So it's really funny. Is that documentary came out? I backed it. My girlfriend backed it as a gift for me. Didn't realize I was backing it at the same time. So, and of course, backing it, we got the special sort of, you could log in and watch it. And I'm like, I'm going to go down in my office and watch this documentary. And she was like, oh, what's the link? And I sent it to her. And I came up to get another drink, and she's like, this is really, really good. And I'm like, this is friggin' fantastic. And so, yeah, anytime I hang out with Pat, I'm like, that movie it's just so good, man.
Like, I was just floored by it, dude. And but the message in the trailer for The Great Kingdom, and I think Pat really brings us over with the people that talk about it in his film, is what is an adventuring party but a family?
Right.
And Gary liked to engender that sense of family wherever he went. And when you sit down to tabletop game with people, it is like getting together with family. It's not like, well, that's my favorite cousin Jim, but he's really famous, so I can't go over and talk to him.
Right.
And that's one of the things I think that makes that makes the hobby so just really cool. But you mentioned you've been working on something. You dropped the name a couple of times, and I have to say I'm very honored. Thank you. You may go in peace and use my name, Delve, for your tabletop RPG. So what is happening with Delve? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Delve. So the real kernel of Delve came a long time ago when I was working at Paizo, and a good friend of mine, Robert Schwalb, was working at Wizards. And Rob was a kind of remote freelancer back before, people were really doing remote, but he'd fly into Seattle quite often to go to meetings and, get together with the rest of the team so he could have face to face. And so we'd go out to dinner, and, we'd have dinner and some drinks, and we'd talk about philosophy and history and current events. And then we want to talk about game design, but being that we worked at competitors, we couldn't talk about our own projects. So it ended up he and I having some really great conversations about what we like and what we don't like about kind of, D20, D&D-ish adventure games. And being able to, sort of vent our frustrations. Both of us came out of that. Rob created Shadow of the Demon Lord, now Shadow of the Weird Wizard, which is a really, really fantastic game. And I started working on Delve. One, Rob writes way faster than I do. And two, I was working at Paizo and then later on Gripner. It took a lot of my time. So for over the last 8 years, I've been working on this game. I run it at conventions, iterate, run it at conventions, iterate. And so right now I'm in the process of actually stitching the first book together. It's called the Delve Proto, which is actually a group of 5 books, but they're all very similar. And there's going to be a class book for each of the 4 classes. And then there's a complete, which is basically all of the classes and stuff for the GM. So one of the books will be for free, probably the Rogue. You can just download it, read it, make a Rogue character, know the game. The other classes will have books, and then if you want the whole thing, you just get the complete, and that's especially for GMs or just completists. And and so yeah, it's sort of my meditation on these types of games, and yeah, it's going to be really familiar in some ways. You roll a d20, high is good, right? You fight monsters. You've got classes, and then there are going to be mechanics that have absolutely surprised and shocked people. Like there's no spell slots. You got a spell, you can keep on casting it. If you want to boost it, if you want to boost it up, you've got to sacrifice the spell for the day, and you can do a bigger event. But if you want to go around just plonking people with magic missile, you can plonk people with magic missile. There's no experience points. There's no initiative. There's no ability modifiers. I don't like numbers that mean other numbers. Multi-classing actually works. Yeah, it's just got a lot of things where when I show it off to people, they come out and they're like, wow, I didn't know games could do, I didn't know you could do that with games. And I was like, well, that's kind of what I want to do with it. So it's sort of, any kind of game design, well, any kind of artistic or creative endeavor, period, is sort of a conversation. And so it really is sort of my say into that conversation, other than all of the other games I've worked on in the past. It's got some shared DNA with Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's got a version of the 3-act system that I designed for that. And although I think this one's better. Of course. So yeah. So as my last gig was winding down, I spent a good solid 2 years on that gig over at Gripner, just working. And then I opened up my files and I'm like, damn, I really like this game. I need to go and finish this game. So for the last 6 months, my 9-to-5 job, I've had the freedom to do this, is I wake up in the morning, I work on Delve. Other than when I do consulting and, the freelance I do here and there.
Right.
It's coming along. It's coming along really well. I'm in the middle of layout now. Most of the design is done. I've got a couple of. I've got a chapter on game mastering, and then piecing together the play chapter, which is, I don't know what is the new 5th edition call it, the rules index. I'm like,
I guess I don't know.
Basically. I've got this chapter in the beginning called Play, which gives you, these are the basic rules of the game. You could read this, start playing, and go. And it's about, I want to say about 12, 13 pages long. And then it's all like, but if you want all of the nitty gritty stuff and, all of the exceptions and how to run social encounters or exploration or other sort of modes of play, that's all going to be in that chapter. So yeah, it's basically my 24 years of thought in the profession, and probably much more before that. It's just a gamer who loved these games, and what's the game I would really love to play all the time. So I'm just going to design that.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And when it drops, I'm going to hold you to this if you say yes, but when it drops, I would love you to come on and do a bit of a deep dive with us,
Oh yeah, you bet.
Look
I'll run the game.
Because, all right, well, I'll hold you to that too. Because we, I've talked to you, message back and forth and that sort of thing. So I've kind of got an idea that you're not gonna, you're not gonna throw any funky White Wolf-ish mechanics at me or anything like that. You definitely got your feet in the old school. So if I say I'm going to swing my sword, I don't have to worry about make an emotional stability roll, Bill, or anything like that.
No, well, I mean, there might be some weird monsters that would make you do that sort of thing.
Well, and I can totally get down with the idea of weird monsters. That is cool.
Yeah, it's definitely what I like to call it is it's got an old school feel, but kind of new school mechanics in some ways, but at the same time, I don't want the mechanics to get in the way of people having a good time. So, like, I like the artwork is in the book is all black and white. It's just got I wanted that feel of you open it up and you feel like this is something that you would buy in the 80s or 90s.
Nice.
A little bit more useful in some ways. I'm very big on explain a mechanic and get the hell out. Don't fluff it up with a bunch of nonsense. I ran the game. I ran the game at what is it, North Texas RPG Con. It was the first time I got to go to that show, and I did have one player who was all like, because I give a character packet when I run these things, and it's more, it's a 11 by 17 folded in half, and it's got all of the information you need to run your character. You want to jump, this is how you jump. You want to swim, this is how you swim. Most of the time, you don't need most of that stuff. The guy was all like, I brought up that I worked on Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and this guy said, you brought up Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I'm looking at all these words, and I'm like, I don't think this is my game. And I was like, it's really not that bad if you want to try it. But yeah, if it's not your game, it's not your game, man.
Sure.
Go find something that's more fun. And then I had a group of players that by the time they were done, it's like, when is this out? I want to give you my money now. This is just this is one of the best things I've played in years. And I'm like, great, right? That's so.
There you go, man.
Mostly everybody had fun. I only had two guys walk away from the table, and even the guy's buddy was all like, oh, I don't mind trying this. And I was like, no, we're gonna go find Castles and Crusades or whatever. My first rule of thumb with gaming, just in general, is find the game you love and play the crap out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life's too short to play games that you don't like.
Yeah. And hopefully, you've liked some of the games that I've created. I know some of the games that I've had a hand in creating are a bit divisive, 4th edition. But, at the same time, you don't, none of us walked into even back when we were working on 4th edition, we were all trying to, in our own way, try to make the game that we thought people would really want to play. And sometimes you're just wrong. So I could release Delve and everybody just tells me, yeah, that's nice, Stephen. But at least, but I'm going to be at, here in the Pacific Northwest, I'm going to be at Dragonflight. I'm running tables at Delve there. I'm going to be at Gamehole Con. I'm running tables at Gamehole Con. So if you're at either of those shows and you want to check it out, there are seats available. And you can always track me down, and I can at least show you what's up. And I've got this 2-hour adventure called Goblin Stomp that's just, it's a fun farce. Either you stomp the goblins or the goblins stomp you.
Well, I love that title, and let me tell you, if you guys are going to be out there, you can't miss Stephen. I mean, you can't miss him. It just, it's like, what's the old saying? There are, there's two kinds of paintings in Japan: paintings of Mount Fuji and paintings from Mount Fuji. He's the Mount Fuji. You can't miss the guy. All right. And this sounds like an absolutely cromulent game, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited for you. Are you going the crowdfunding route to get it out there? Or are you just going to straight to publisher and just put it out there?
So in some ways, what I'm putting out at first is a little incomplete. It's four classes, 4 kin. That's what I'm not going species. I was going ancestries for a while, and then I came across another game, an African setting game, and they were like, we're going to call our races kin. And I'm like, I like that. And I went with the typical, it's human, halfling, elf, and dwarf. And then I've got design and art for the next 4, which that's when we get a little bit crazier. And that's orc, djinborn, gnome, and weirdwood, which is a tree man sort of race.
Okay.
Everything else, and then other classes on top of that. So, and it's just the first 5 levels. And to be honest, I don't know if I'm gonna. There's part of me that I might just go to 10 levels on this game. If you look at everybody who posts numbers on this, there's just such a dramatic drop off when it comes to play after 10th level. It just drops into the abyss. And so, and given how difficult that design is, one, to get right and just to make interesting, I really question why a lot of games go to 20th or even 30th level these days. It's just you get a huge drop off of play.
Well, I question that too, and that kind of dovetails nicely into some other questions that I've got for you, but I don't quite want to jump into the deep end of the pool yet. Let's wade over there, as it were. But so you're looking at kind of almost like an introductory set or starter set, but with a little bit more functionality to it. Think,
like I said, I'm going to release it as 5 books.
Okay.
The download, the Rogue book is going to be it's downloaded for free. You want to look at the system, and it'll have the whole, basically, as long, not counting the GM stuff, it's going to have all of the rules on how to play the game. It's going to have all of the stuff for the various kin, and then the rules for playing a rogue. And so if you just want to sort of take a look at what the game's all about, you can get that. You can create a rogue character. There's going to be an iconic in the back that if you don't want to create a rogue character, but you just want to go, there you go. And then I'll also have one for warriors and wizards and priests. And those will be PDF downloads for a relatively small amount of money, somewhere around the $6 or $7 range.
Right on.
And then the complete is all of that information, plus advice on being a GM, a whole bunch of critters, a whole bunch of treasure, and then 2 introductory adventures, Goblin Stomp and the Crystal Mans. And so that's made for the completist and the GM, right? The person who's like, just give me everything. And it's like, here you go. And there will probably be, at the very least, a short print run of that. And then my goal after that is there's a companion to it that's going to come out later that's got more classes and kin. And then after that, one where it increases everything to 10th level. And then after that, I might do, it's like, now we need to print books, kids. So this is how we're going to do, what the game is. We're going to put it all into one big omnibus with some new stuff in it too. And that's probably where that'll go. Of course, keeping an eye on things like the price of shipping, where you can get printing done. I saw a good number of my friends have gotten zinged lately with the price of just, shipping books from China.
Yeah. Shipping is, let me tell you what, I have a nearly complete set of just the books, not the box, of Twilight 2000 1.0 that my co-host in Australia has been waiting for like 3 years now. Shipping's not getting any cheaper. It's going to cost me like $60 to send a stack of books that thick to him.
And Mike Selinker recently just wrote an excellent blog showing and giving some of the reasons why that's going up. So, of course, keeping my pulse on making it so it's affordable and on all sides. Me trying not to, we'll see how it works in the long run. Good intentions and all, but at the very least, it's going to be a digital release, which you can get on my website. I've also got some physical products that I've actually produced for the game already that I'm going to be selling on my website probably this fall. We'll of course put it on Drive-Thru RPG, and I'll have to see exactly how the pricing scheme will be, because they take a huge chunk out of they just sit back. It's like, no money. We have platform money.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're kind of the Steam of pen and paper RPG stuff.
Right. And then and there's all sorts of, especially if you want, if you want to do the best thing for your game and everything else, how do I deal with virtual tabletops? That's kind of a secondary concern. But I already get that question. It's like, are you going to have virtual tabletop support? And I'm like, I know enough to get me in a lot of trouble on Roll20, and I'm sure that I could educate myself and everything else. But these are all expenses. Either I have to learn it and do it myself. This game, just about for everything except for, of course, the artwork. Even though I've actually do some artwork in the book itself, it's a garage band sort of thing. I do the cartography for it. I do the layout for it. I did the art direction for it. I do the writing for it. Like it's a one-man show. Other than Rick Hershey's done some really fantastic artwork for it already. Brian Snowdy has done some really great artwork for it as well. But even with the artwork, as I'm no AI, don't even get me started on that shit. I'm leaning on a bunch of basically clip art's not the right word, stock art.
Right.
I mean, because art is just art's expensive, and while I have I've purchased proprietary art for this project. Luckily, some of the artists I'm working on do a lot of really fantastic stock art that I've been able to purchase as well, and which has brought the price down. But everything, I don't need to tell you, everything's getting more expensive, and so trying to do this as sort of a one-man show as cheap as possible has always been a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine, finding that balance, it's like the deadly triangle, affordability, quality, and availability, and you've got to keep those three in balance. I mean, if it's really, really affordable, how much can you as the creator afford to put into something like art? How much time do you want to devote into something you're not gonna break even on?
Right.
And how willing are you to get that out there to people? But then if if you balance in the other way too much, well, things start to tip off. It's really high quality, but the affordability is going away and the availability is going away. So I completely, I get what you're saying. And I mean, I don't want to go down this street, but I mean, with the desiring to have, real artists do your art for you, I, over on my Patreon, I have the D&D module a month thing that I do for patrons, and there's not art in them.
Mm-hmm.
They're 3 or 4 pages, and as much as I would like to put art in them, my choices are none or AI, and I would rather prefer none.
Yeah.
Than just fall back on guy with sword standing over dead dragon. I can do that all the day long, but guy with sword standing over dead dragon is taken from thousands of other actual flesh and blood artists who are making $0. So
right. Yeah.
But that's a whole nother discussion, and I think we're probably simpatico on that, which again kind of moves us along in the direction a little bit of man, is it okay? Is this, maybe I've just focused on it more with the news bits I've done and everything, but is it just me, or has the industry's really shook in like the last 15, 16 months? I say the hobby industry, the tabletop industry.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you start talking about tabletop RPGs. Well, I mean, I think I think it was shook a little bit due to the pandemic, and that had both its good and bad sort of things. But everything was shook.
Yeah, yeah, it's global.
I think what really shook it was the OGL debacle. That made people go, and I know even myself, my job went pretty quickly from, I'm designing a game to I'm talking to lawyers and figuring out if I can continue to design this game.
Yeah.
And what that had a cascade effect on is it made people who were, I did this panel at NorwestCon, which luckily there was an actual lawyer there too, but talking about, licenses in the tabletop RPG space. It made people really question licenses in the tabletop RPG space. And it made me question licenses as well. As somebody who worked at Wizards of the Coast when the OGL was at least released and worked with, for a while I was the kind of go-to person for one of the lawyers up at Wizards of the Coast, and we would talk about the OGL and other licenses. The Kenzer license came up quite a bit, other sort of licenses back then. And sort of the pre-assumptions that go on with those things, it made like the OGL really was a gentleman's agreement. It was you're going to do this, and we're not going to sue you. That was it. Now the terrible thing behind it is some of the stuff it gets a little complicated, but some of the stuff that Wizards or TSR and other companies used to threaten to sue for, they didn't have grounds.
No.
They just went around and scared the shit out of people.
Yeah, and so, you hit exactly the right verb, scare. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the equivalent of, I'm going to take this black length of pipe and just kind of hold it like this. And you see me walking down the street, your thought is not, oh, that's probably just a black length of pipe. Your thought is, he's armed,
Right.
And so you avoid, you get out of my way, you move out of my way. And even when a company knows it's in the wrong, it'll send out a cease and desist.
Yes.
Even because, like, hey, I used to put on my free D&D modules, hey, Wizards, please don't sue me, because I said Greyhawk and AD&D in them, and I made them look like AD&D modules, and I gave them away for free. And regardless of what legal leg Wizards of the Coast might or might not have had to stand on, I couldn't have gone up to Washington State to defend myself in a court.
Right.
And if they'd said stop, I would have stopped immediately.
Yeah. And so, one of the geniuses of the OGL was realizing that people wanted to actually make D&D compatible stuff. Legally, they could, but there was basically a whole bunch of potential traps within it because most people don't understand intellectual property well and trademarks and copyright. They mix them all up.
Right.
And so what the OGL kind of did was said, okay, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. This is what we're defending. This is really what we can't defend. So we're going to give you a license for the stuff we really can't defend. And it sort of made things a little clearer for everybody. And then, as it went on, everybody, for 20 years, people were like, oh, we can do this and we can do that. And there are plenty of times when I read, over the years, as somebody who's read the open game license and, had to basically put it in the back of books, there's a lot of open game license. Well, you didn't do that right. Wizards has never in the past gone and really, beat anybody on the hand with the ruler. It just kind of happened. And so when Wizards of the Coast basically decided that they were going to revoke the license or unauthorize the license,
right,
is funny within itself, and basically scared the hell out of everybody, and and put together more questions, and we're all like, oh, and if you make a bunch of money now, you're going to have to pay us for this license, and a bunch of stuff they probably couldn't defend anyway. And then we're shocked at the response to it. very negative response to it. It sort of put 20 years of precedent on what you could and couldn't do, sort of threw it out the window, and then also created a lot of ill will.
I was going to say it also burned 20 years of goodwill.
It burned 20 years of goodwill, and partially because Wizards of the Coast, even though they create a tabletop role-playing game, they have a bad tendency at times to go, but we're not really a tabletop role-playing game company. We're something more, and you guys just don't realize it yet. The same thing happened during the 4th edition games with Gleemax, right? We're going to create the new sort of platform in which you play games. This is sort of the golden egg that they're seeking, and unfortunately, they kind of always show their hand before they actually create the thing that they say that they're going to create. Which is exactly what happened here. Why they couldn't, they're gonna pursue their virtual tabletops. They're gonna pursue their own sort of marketplaces. They're gonna pursue, and in fact, they already have sort of microtransaction tchotchkes, digital tchotchkes. Right now, they're dice, but they're gonna have skins and all sorts of stuff, because that's what every game, especially pay to play or free to play games, do right now. And a lot of people have made a lot of money, mostly preying on other folks. What I uncharitably will say, loneliness and addiction, right? But a lot of people made a lot of money doing that, and I'm sure that there are people at Wizards of the Coast who are saying, we have one of the best known brands, period, in gaming. Where's our share of the pie?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I remember years ago I got invited to play a MechWarrior Online game, one of the iterations of MechWarrior Online, and the team I was on, I was with some friends of mine at the time. We were rolling up the enemy, and then suddenly we are being hit by precision artillery and airstrikes, and our team leader, our lance leader, says over the voice channel, "Shit, they're throwing credit cards at us." And one of the guys, or all the people on the other team that were losing, literally just popped open another window and bought airstrikes and bought artillery strikes.
Right.
And beat us down. And what I fear is that you get a dungeon master of any age enjoying the new edition, enjoying the physicality of the book, of the rolling of the dice, of having a nice set of Dwarven Forge out on the table and miniatures, and they're really having a good time. And, you've got some sort of soy decent Eddie Deason across the table who whips out his smartphone and says, "Hey, guess what? My paladin has a Vorpal Sword of Dragon Slaying. So I just beat your boss monster." Well, what do you mean? I just bought it,
Yeah, and so the funny thing about it is back in the 80s when I first started playing this game, is people tried to do that. Like kids on the block, they're like, there was this really big thing. If you played against the giants and you beat the whatever giant, chief or jarl or king, you became the king of the fire giants. And they'd come to your game and they're like, "I am king of the fire giants. All the fire giants need to obey me." That's all like, no, you're rolling up a new character.
Yeah.
Right. And no, I'm playing my character, and it's all like, you were not. And so even in somebody who administered living campaigns, Living Greyhawk and other campaigns, like there is a place for that. There's an organized play system. Some people really enjoy that, and there has always been sort of the specter of collusion and play to win or pay to win within that sort of format. But run-of-the-mill D&D is not that game. And it's not going to be that game, no matter what you do. Because the biggest problem with those play-to-win schemes is they're usually in competitive, not cooperative games. And D&D at its heart is a cooperative game. It's a storytelling game. It's a group of people get together, you may feel like the GM is working against you, but at best, unless the GM's an asshole, right? That's just theater. Like I love to laugh at character misfortune as a GM, but at the same time, not to the point where it's arbitrary and everything else. I love building tension. I love it when characters only squeak through. If it's a one shot, I don't mind it when characters die. If it's not a one shot, characters can die, but there's always a way to bring them back if the player doesn't want to make a character. Right? The story must go on, and that just doesn't lend itself well to the spend money to win scheme.
No, it certainly doesn't, and I feel like the problem that we could potentially run into with this, Stephen, and I mean, I do, you tell me if I'm blackpilling. I want your honest opinion, because you've been in the halls, right? You've been on the other side of the fort from where I am. My concern is Wizards of the Coast now creating such a structure that they will entertain and lean heavily into the people who want to throw credit cards at the DM or throw credit cards at the adventure. And if I don't flex on that, and we're in the structured play system that Wizards of the Coast wants, I mean, I invite a bunch of people over and tell them to roll up first level characters, and then I break out my copy of Tomb of Horrors and say, ha ha, I've got you all, and everybody's dead in 5 minutes. They leave the house unsatisfied, and they never play D&D with me again. But maybe I do that with another group. Maybe I learn my lesson or what. But let's say I'm a perfectly reasonable dungeon master, and I just don't want our aforementioned fellow who, was willing to spend $9.99 on a virtual Vorpal sword. And I say, look, it's great that you spent that money. You're not using that in my game just because you bought it.
Right.
A couple of taps on his phone or mouse clicks on his PC when he gets home, and suddenly I have a world of trouble with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
And now me getting a group together is next to impossible because, I've gotten poor ratings or whatever in their ranking system. I mean, is this paranoia on my part?
I can see why it's a concern, but I also think it doesn't speak to, another thing that I think Wizard of the Coast has been basically trying to struggle with is the fact that they don't understand their own player base. In some ways, they desperately want a player base to be this group of people. I'm sure they've created persona models. These are the group of people, but folks who play role-playing games tend to not follow into niches very well, right? So,
correct.
So a weird kind of example of this is Wizard of the Coast has been telling us for years that their player base has been younger and younger and younger. And do I doubt that? Well, to the extent that they say it, yeah. But I do think, and it's a great sign for the hobby, that younger people have started coming in. I talk to more kids now who play D&D. I talk to, my stepdaughter, and she tells me about the D&D club at her school and everything else, and that she might play or she might not, right? And all sorts of things. And that's great, because there was a period of time I don't think that was happening. But at the same time, I'm also like, wow, you're leaning really into nostalgia with this new non-edition, right? Like, one, all of a sudden we can buy Warduke figures again, which is great. I love Warduke. Right. And and you're going to put him and Venger on I'm like, and you're producing adventures that are basically, rejiggerings of old adventures. And even your best-selling adventure, the Strahd, is a rejigger of a 30, 40-year-old adventure, right?
Yeah. Ravenloft I6.
And so, you're trying to tell us that in some ways the older gamers, well, they're not really our customers anymore, but man, you're really trying to.
Yeah. Am I or am I not their customers? I mean,
And the truth is, every once in a while, and I heard this when I worked at Wizards, it's like, well, we can fire some of our customers. No, you can't. No, customers fire you.
Yeah.
You don't have that choice. They decide to move on because you're not giving them what they want. And now, I mean, maybe they're playing the balancing act of well, we've got a very diverse group of people, diverse age, diverse background, and everything else, and we're trying to satisfy everybody. That's always difficult. It's also often laudable. So maybe they're doing that. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of what I hear them say and then what I see them do, and they seem to be at opposites, right? Kyle Brinks came on and said the stupidest thing imaginable. It's like, white guys my age can't leave this hobby fast enough. And it's all like, really? Who do you want leaving this hobby? Why do you want them leaving this hobby? That's a fucking utterly stupid statement.
It was mind-bogglingly stupid, and the only thanks I can give to him for that is I made a video about it, and it went pretty huge for my channel, Yeah.
You telling me D&D's making so much money that they can just throw some away? Bullshit. It's garbage. No,
it's absolutely bullshit, and I think it took, I jokingly refer to 5th edition back as it was in 2014 as the apology edition, and we've had such a wonderful run over the last 10 years, the past 18 months excepted, of generally good. I mean, I can tell people, yeah, you can. Oh, you want to play 1st edition AD&D? This really interests you? Yeah, well, here you go. Just go buy the books and get print on demand. You don't have to go to eBay. You don't have to pay $200 for a Dungeon Master's Guide that looks like it was run over by a truck.
Right.
And a $75 monster manual that somebody used a slice of pizza as a bookmark in. You can get fresh, fancy, crisp new books. They're $30-40 a piece. Knock yourself out. You're going to have a lot of fun. And most of the modules are available print on demand too. You can have the entirety of AD&D, and it can be 1978 again in your basement, den, living room, attic, whatever. Right on. And then here comes Kyle Brink, and just rides that wrecking ball into 10 years of goodwill on the heels of dragging the OGL out into the courtyard and murdering it in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. This is a hobby industry of razor thin margins.
Right.
And
I mean, and to at least play, to give Kyle some credit, right? If he was saying something like, we really celebrate more, we know that people of different backgrounds are now coming to Dungeons and Dragons and they're really enjoying it. And we want them to be able to tell the stories that they want to tell. I'm all for that. Hells yeah. I want to see all sorts of, fun and crazy stories. And we've been able to see that in the last few years. Not, everything's not Conan Sword and Sorcery or based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. There's new and dynamic voices within the space. Yeah, absolutely. Celebrate the hell out of that. But every once in a while, Wizards start saying, yeah, we're just going to fire some of our customers. And it's all like, no, they fire you.
Yeah. And, this is exactly how you wind up with another Osric-like situation. Wizards of the Coast flipped out, and you've told the story of exactly how it happened with the removal of all the PDFs. And they told myself and hundreds of thousands, well, maybe tens of thousands of fans of 2nd edition and 1st edition OD&D and Basic, oh, you're all a bunch of pirates.
Right.
And so what are we going to do about you pirates? Well, we're just going to make pirates out of you even harder by taking all this stuff away.
Right.
And It was one of the most gobsmackingly, mind-bogglingly dumb things I'd ever seen. And I was in the room. In a virtual sense, I was in the room when Ozark was created. I saw the emails that flew between probably people
Yeah.
personally and people I know personally. And the people at Wizards of the Coast were just like, but you can't do that. And Stuart and Matt were like, oh, yes, we very much can.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, at least as far as that, yeah, I'll tell the story and I'll try to be as brief as possible. But I was teaching game design at a local college, and we were talking about like the history of level design. And so one of the things that I brought for the very early level design, of course, I brought some D&D stuff. I brought Village of Homeland. And I'm like, let's take a look at this, because this is a good example of pre-computer level design. And we talk about what works and doesn't work. And I basically made copies and gave out, the Moat House. And as I'm walking around class doing my lecture, I notice on all of the computers, everybody's looking at the PDF of the Village of Homeland or Temple of Elemental Evil. I'm like, where'd you guys get that? And they're like, oh, we found it on this website. And I'm like, fascinating, right? And so
go on.
and basically told Wizards and emailed the website, which was a commercial website, and it was like, do you have permission to host these things? And they're like, well, we can only answer that from the publisher. And I'm like, did you look at my email address? Right? It's all like, and the overreaction to all of that was to shut every sort of PDF thing down on the internet. And this was, during the 4th edition or around the 4th edition days. There was a huge worry about like this Paizo company is going to, create the Pathfinder role-playing game, which is extensively 3.5. And I remember going to a meeting and they're like, what do we do about all of this? And I'm like, why don't we just put up all the old PDFs for free? And they went, what? And I said, or, a small cost. I'm like, we're not selling these things anymore. They're not in the market. Like, so why don't we just celebrate Dungeons and Dragons and just put them out there so people can get them, and then you don't have to worry about the pirating because they're just out there. And they all looked at me like I was nuts. It was all like, and which is basically later on they just is basically what we have. There's some holes in it and everything else, but you can go through drive-through and pick up the stuff. And I always thought that was the best way to do it, because new players and old players are going to love this. The new players can, I lost my stuff because mom threw it out, or I forgot where I put it after college, or blah, 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 blah. This is a way that I don't have to go into the collector's market and find all of this stuff and relive my past and maybe run some old stuff. And newer players can go back and they can be all like, so where did this come from? Like, where is the first mention of Vecna? Because they have a desire. If the more you get into it, the geekier you go down the rabbit hole, you're going to want to know all of this stuff. And you might giggle at things that were printed in the past, or it might spur you on to create the next big storyline, at least for your own personal campaign. But that wealth of information should have. It seemed like they just wanted to throw it away for a while. Like it was just useless to them. And I'm glad that at least down the line, I think cooler heads prevailed, and they realized that, people actually like this stuff.
Yeah. And more practically, they realized they were leaving dollars on the ground.
Yeah, I was always, every once in a while, where I understand, I worked for both Wizards and Paizo. Those are companies. They want to make money, and ostensibly you create what you want to do is create fantastic products that people want to buy. But especially when you have a back catalog of things that people want, why would you leave that? Every once in a while, it's all, they, folks, especially at Wizards, started pretending like, we don't really want to make money. It's like, yeah, you do. People want to give you the fucking money. Just let them give you the money. And if you don't want the money for whatever reason, then put it out there for free. Let people celebrate the entire history of this game. And are you going to get criticism sometimes? Sure, right? But you can put your warning labels on whatever the hell you want to try to stave that off, or whatever ridiculous thing you want to do. But at the end of the day, you really want to foster positivity with your game and the back catalog, and embrace the fact that this thing's 50 years. It survived this crazy game that was stitched together in some nearly unemployed guy's basement, has survived and thrived after 50 years, when computers were going to kill it, video games were going to kill it, novels were going to kill it, TV was going to kill it, movies were going to kill it, and people are still playing this game, and they're playing it the way that folks played it in 1970.
Yeah.
And that tends to be the way people really like it. They might do it with some digital, on a virtual tabletop or over Zoom or whatnot. But at the end of the day, the game is about getting together with your friends and making fun of each other's imaginary friends.
It really is. It's pretend elves on graph paper.
Right.
And you would think that would be okay, how do we appeal to these people like this? Okay, cool. Do that. Make money. But as you say, it seems like somebody raises their head periodically at Wizards of the Coast and says, we can fire some of these. We don't need their business.
Yeah, I mean, there's business pressures there. Absolutely. I mean, as I tell this to people all the time, and especially if you're really into role playing and you've never been into Magic, D&D money is kind of chump change compared to Magic money.
It is. I was looking at this with Timothy M. Holt, great guy. Do recommend his channel, guys, if you're not subscribed. But Tim has a very keen mind for business, and the numbers brought up for last year's profits. D&D is not even the second most profitable thing that Hasbro does.
No, and
it's at the bottom of the list. In fact, it's still profitable. Don't get me wrong; it's not a money loser,
and it can be profitable. But it's got it's got so many more barriers to, in some ways, entry and profitability. One, you're making poor folks read, right? And in this day and age, that's even become harder and harder. And you sort of offset that with digital tools.
Right.
Two, Magic cards were the original NFTs. Like, you just buy them and buy them and buy them and buy them and buy them, and you've got more than you need, but you're always chasing the really rare one. And of course, Magic. Online versions of Magic and now various other card games, they play with the rarity scheme and in that sort of way too, where you end up purchasing more than you actually use, and that's the shtick. That's how that thing makes money. You're going to have a whole bunch of cards you'll never ever use. They'll sit in boxes and everything else, and you'll create a deck out of some small percentage of those cards. And then cards are, of course, much cheaper to produce. They're much cheaper to ship. They're much cheaper to go about. It's a competitive game. Competitive game talks to a much wider audience in a lot of ways. You only need 2 people to play rather than 3 to 6. There's a lot of things going for Magic that just aren't going for tabletop role-playing games. Every once in a while, I get this. I get this with consulting gigs all the time, as people want to come into the RPG market. How do we make this bigger? Can we have a 15-minute D&D game? And it's all like, you could, but it really wouldn't be D&D.
Yeah.
You could have a D&D-like game, but it's not going to be like D&D. There are parts of D&D which make it compelling for a good chunk of people for a long period of time. You take those away, and it's sort of a fire and forget game. It's and you're just not going to have the same sort of audience.
Yeah, and there are, I've got a great many of them on the shelves around me and in boxes on the floor, and stored up in my attic. There are a number of games that as soon as 1975 rolled around, you had people taking a swing at D&D with this concept of, yeah, but we're going to strip it down so it's not so clunky and you don't have to worry. It's about this, that, and they're all relics, dude.
Oh yeah.
They're not republished, except maybe as a curio, like when Steve Jackson Games released their Clickbox games a few years ago, re-released those from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
They're curiosities. I would probably draw 1,000 screams of anger about this, but guys, Gary invented the wheel. These guys are just inventing new tread patterns. And not even particularly good ones in some cases.
Well, and the great thing about it is Gary and Dave and everybody else involved in those early days created a new way to play games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when the first game I played, I was like, what, games can do this? Like, that was such a brilliant surprise. Yeah. And now we live in a time where a lot of, at least, if not the tone of that, the procedures of that are just what we expect from games these days, right? I mean, I used to tell my students all the time, you live in the wave that started with that drop. And that drop was so fundamental, and we can talk about it and everything else, but it is entirely, there's a reason why The Economist, when Gygax died, had his obituary in The Economist, right, is fundamentally those folks changed the way we play games, period.
Oh, absolutely. I was talking about this today because I'm sure Wizards of the Coast, their new president, he comes from Blizzard Activision, head of World of Warcraft development over there. Think of what a Mobius strip that is. There is no World of Warcraft without Dungeons and Dragons.
Nope.
An alternate
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
There's no World of Warcraft. There's no Magic the Gathering.
No Diablo.
Right.
None of that.
Yeah.
And the Elder Scrolls from Bethesda. Do you know the trivia behind that name, the Elder Scrolls?
No, I don't.
It was a meta joke that's back when they were making racing and sports games at Bethesda. They played a D&D game in the office, and it may have been heavily house ruled. But the joke was, what if one of your characters in the game got a hold of their character sheet and they could change things on it? And that would fundamentally alter the reality in the world, right?
Right.
So that, they jokingly refer, and that actually comes up in a few places in the various Elder Scrolls games, that you can retrieve an Elder Scroll as part of a quest, and it involves some world-changing thing when it gets in the hands of the person that wants it. None of this happens. This nomenclature, Doom, as well as I do, Doom, was promulgated from an idea that began at a D&D game.
Oh yeah.
They were riding on the highs of how well received Wolf 3D was, and they were playing D&D 15 hours a day in their group home, as it were, in Texas, and said, "Hey, wouldn't this make a cool computer game? We'll do our new sequel on what if demons were released across the world." It's a fundamental part of the fabric of modern pop culture, at least in the West.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's, you can play counterfactual all you want. Would role-playing games have popped up at some point sometime? Well, they probably popped up in other parts of the world for small periods of time. There's a story that the Bronte sisters basically had role-playing sessions that led to some of their stories, which I always found really intriguing. I haven't been able to find a whole bunch of evidence for that. But I mean, and it goes back to storytelling and, playing cowboys and Indians, or cops and robbers, or, whatever when we were young. There's so much of, especially when we're kids, there's so much of play that is actually teaching us how to be people, right? In a lot of ways, in fun and interesting ways. And it sort of pushed those ideas of play into an older audience. And back in, of course, during the Satanic Panic, this could cause all sorts of communists like brainwash people with role play.
Right.
That was going on, but now now they're finding that it's actually really good for people, and a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists are like, there's actually really great benefits to role playing games, which I always assumed, growing up and listening to, luckily my parents weren't crazy, but like listening to adults or like tell my parents, you let Stephen play D&D, that's satanic and everything else. And they're like, I don't know, he started playing D&D and he reads more and his grades went up, so we don't really care, right? That's basically their argument.
I think I kind of sabotaged myself. I was already reading at like a college level when I was in middle school, apparently. Yeah. And then I discovered D&D, and my parents didn't see the benefit to it because I was already a pretty smart kid. So yeah, right. They unfortunately got pulled into it, but that's another story. Please continue.
And so, fundamentally we live in a much better time where it's easier to find a D&D game. It's easier to keep a group together for the most part. That's always a herding cats possibility. Parents are actually pro the game rather than not. We've had this nice fundamental change. There used to be this bumper sticker that came out at 3.5 that I've got a copy of somewhere. It's like, I played D&D before it was cool. Now it's considered cool. I don't know what cool is. It seems like a marketing campaign, but I don't know if I think D&D is cool, but I know I'm not cool. So I don't think it really works that way. I don't think the cool kids play D&D, or they might dabble in D&D, or maybe there's not cool kids anymore. I don't know. But so in a lot of ways, like, when people talk to me about, well, D&D is so much part of the culture now, I'm like, it always has been, but for a long time people felt like they had to hide it. I never felt that way, but I'm uncool. But now they don't, right? Now you've got parents, especially during the pandemic. I had some of my friends who did this. They would search out D&D games just to give their kids something to do, like, because they heard it was good and it would help with math skills and reading and all, and adjustment and anxiety, whatever laundry list of things that are out there. So why, and it's part of pop culture more so. I mean, they're like, maybe if the section of the D&D game in E.T. was longer and people had realized that they were playing D&D in that movie. But no, we got Stranger Things, which sort of made people go, oh, I remember that game, or oh, what's that game, and everything
right.
else. And so it's a lot more accepted right now, which is fantastic. But the thing that I kind of wish that we as gamers would do is kind of celebrate that more rather than fighting with each other all the time.
And I think you hit on something there, and I think the most Wizards corporate has ever been afraid of its customers. I mean, truly, like, crap, we have to give them whatever they want, was when they accidentally did the OGL, because you had old school guys like me. You had people whose first D&D was 3.5. You had people who had just started playing 5th edition and were thinking about publishing their own Maze of Peril or Fairy Mound or whatever like that. We all stood shoulder to shoulder and pushed back.
And even scarier is you had, which I think like there are two things that I think scared the crap out of Wizards is all of a sudden watching these D&D Beyond subscriptions go bye-bye.
Yeah.
The second one was, it's like, I think in some ways, the grognards are complaining again. That's all we hear the grognards do. But when the younger group of influencers started going, wait, what? Like, most of whom either had just started dipping their toe into or were thinking about dipping their toe into third-party publishing. And they all went, what? And so I think that was probably, as far as feedback on the internet went, that's the thing that made him go, oh shit.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't serve Wizards of the Coast for, the grognards to snap at the 5e fans and the 5e fans to look down their nose at the grognards and the 3.5 guys and the Pathfinder guys to snipe at each other. It's that, when that starts up in social media spaces, there's somebody at Wizards going, just according to plan, everything's back as it should be.
Maybe. And that's another thing is I have friends that work at Wizards. I have people that I've worked with that work at Wizards. I have had people that I absolutely love, adore, and respect who got laid off in this last round at Wizards. You don't go, like the people who actually work on D&D that I know love it so much, and I know from when I work there is no matter how much they pay you, you don't go work on D&D because you're going to get rich, right? You can make a pretty decent living. You can make an okay living. You go because you love this thing. And then there's another sort of layer, which is, this is a business layer, sometimes populated by people who really like what D&D brings to the table, but wish it wasn't so goddamn complicated and filled with people with opinions. There was an old joke at Wizards, which is a really terrible joke, but when I first started working there, it was mostly about Magic R&D, the people who created Magic cards, and it was the perfect R&D designer. You could just put in a box, slide a pizza under it once a day, shake the box, and cards fall out. And unfortunately, there's kind of a level in just about any sort of creative business, and you can find this in the record business, and you can find this in all, the art business and everything else, is there's a layer of people who are playing a different game. And they just wish these damn creatives would shut up and not be so damn particular about things, right? It's all like they've got ideas and they make things and everything else. Could they just shut up and make us money? And
yeah, absolutely.
But the larger a company gets, the more it sort of starts to work that way. It starts being run by people who don't really have. They have a passion for the money they make. They have a passion for the larger market share that they have. They have a passion for the marketing budget and getting the word out and getting the messaging correct. But all of that is ostensibly built upon the creatives of people who make the things that people love and want to continue to love them. And I think that's why we see all of this kind of crazy back and forth and screaming at each other. And, when it comes to not only D&D, but Disney and Star Wars and just about everything that came from our childhood that was like this cool thing that popped up that geeks loved, that is now part of mainstream and is making more money than anybody ever thought it would make in the past. And instead of letting sort of the interest of that sort of wax and wane, there's a big impetus within the C-suite. It's got to stay constant, right?
Right.
And they have different ideas about that. And as soon as you start throwing the creatives out and start focusing on sort of the business part of it, then there is a tendency to create product that really doesn't sing to anybody, or not as much, right? I mean, Marvel's a really good example of that. Like, there's been some really good Marvel movies in the last few years, but there's also been Marvel movies that I know that I've watched, and I'm like, I couldn't tell you a damn thing about that movie when I was done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember a bit of it, but I can tell you, even the first 2 or 3 Iron Man movies, even though the second one was kind of, a little bit more so-so, I could tell you all about those movies. Like, they stuck in my head in a way that sometimes later films didn't, even though there was cool fight scenes. It was a lot of fun and everything else. And I think that's always a bad tendency when geek companies start focusing too much on the business and rather than the fun and the passion.
Well, I definitely agree with you. You get no argument from me on that. There's something, and this is not anything I could ever affect, but this is a purely business kind of related question, but you have been there and done that, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. Let me propose a notion that I had, and maybe you can tell me, first of all, that's never going to happen, or yeah, that could possibly, or if it did, it wouldn't work. I do want your feedback on this. So imagine, if you will, a situation, because fans of older editions of D&D, and by the way, if you're watching this and you're a fan of 5e, first of all, welcome to the channel. That's you also. Older edition is 5e on back now at this point, right? But imagine, if you will, so we're this close to everybody joining hands and Dungeons and Dragons literally being an unassailable, bulletproof, solid titanium giant that will never be displaced in a serious way in the market. The thing that could push it over, in my opinion, and this is the part I want your feedback on. Right now, as I said earlier, I can go on to drive-through or whatever it is, DM's Guild, and get all of the core AD&D books in some printed fashion, most of the classic adventures in some printed fashion. Mm-hmm. I can do that for 2nd edition. I can do it for 3rd edition. I can do it for 4th edition, so on and etc. If Wizards of the Coast said, okay, here's what. We're going to open the OGL up by 1 more degree. You want to publish an adventure for 1st edition AD&D instead of publishing an adventure for the 1st edition of the world's most popular RPG. I mean, how many OSR books have you seen that have taken that path, right? Yeah. You want to say AD&D? That's fine. You say AD&D. All right. Don't use Greyhawk. Basically stick to the OGL stuff. But if you want to say AD&D, you say AD&D. You want to refer to a page in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 2nd edition, refer to a page in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 2nd edition. You want to talk about Sword and Fist from 3E. That's whatever you want to do.
Everyone loves the Mercurial Greatsword.
I'm sorry?
Everyone loves the Mercurial Greatsword.
Right, exactly. You sell your book. You cut us in for 6.5%. I think Wizards of the Coast does that, and you would have millions of happy grognards. I honestly think that would fix D&D forever. The ability to go into a store, to go to drive-through, buy a D&D, go into a store, or back on the drive-through and buy a brand new AD&D module by Stephen Radney-MacFarland or Bill Sylvie or Jorge Uribe or Shinchar. I'm just naming off people in the chat, but to do that would create an unassailable wall around D&D forever. And I would happily enter into such a deal because, dude, I pay 30% to YouTube for the money that I make on YouTube. I pay less money to Patreon, but I do give part of my Patreon takes a slice, then they send it to PayPal. PayPal takes a slice. And I don't complain. I do it happily because it lets me make money. I personally think Wizards of the Coast does this, and that's it. That's it. They won D&D and it was advanced. What do you think?
I mean, in some ways, I'm going to nitpick parts of this whole thing, but I think overall, I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, in some ways, back when I was in that meeting, and I'm like, yeah, just make it all available. Let people read and play what they want. Was sort of the low bar, low tech, sort of way to do that. The first thing I'll point out is there was some talk about having OGLs and SRDs for earlier editions of the game back when Kyle Brink was doing his Goodwill tour. We have not heard anything from that forever. No. So I think that's dead. I think they might have looked at it. I mean, so first of all, they put the old the 5.5 or 5.1 SRD into Creative Commons, and that was obviously a knee-jerk reaction because they had some things in there that they should have taken out. I think that was oh crap, let's do something now, get these people to shut up. And then of course, if you're going to do that again, they probably looked at it and said, wow, that's a lot of work. Like the 3.5 one is pretty easy, right? Because there's already a document that's there. Right. There's a lot of documents that are there. Fourth edition, how do we do that? Second edition, how do we do that? First edition, how do we do that? OD&D, how do we do that? Basic expert, how do we do that? And then they probably took a look at, this is going to take so much, we're going to have to hire people to do it. It's going to cost this much to do it. And what do we really gain from it at the end? In for the immediate sort of, in a year that Hasbro had to do a whole bunch of layoffs. So I think that had a lot to do with it, is they probably looked at it and said, well, not now. Now Kyle's not there. Like, he was the one who stuck his neck out and said, yeah, we're looking into doing this. He's not there anymore. So nobody's really going to, you might have a champion or two that's sitting at Wizards of the Coast saying, we should still look into this. They're still, of course, they're about to release a new non-edition of the game. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of that flew out the window. You could definitely, I think, because all of this stuff right now is being managed by Drive-Thru RPG, and I don't know exactly what the contract and the percentage is involved. I don't know how much Drive-Thru is taking. I don't know how much Wizards is taking and everything else. I think in a lot of ways, Wizards of the Coast would much rather have their own distribution system before they did something like that, in order for them to gain more of the profit. But yeah, I agree with you, it could be done, but there's a bunch of hurdles that kind of stand in the way. And my guess is, especially this year, given how much they're producing for the game and how much they've lost as far as overhead and people working on parts of the game, it's probably like a low priority for them. I think it would be a good plan, but I think when they look at bottom lines, and is this going to affect what Hasbro needs to accomplish in order for it to get into better graces with its own investors and stockholders, and of course the stock market in general, yeah, it's not going to happen. At least
I know it's a complete pipe dream, but I guess it's nice to hear from, someone who has been there and done that. It is indeed there and doing that, if not inside Wizards of the Coast, but in the business. But honestly, you know, I can't be bought, but I can be rented.
Right. I mean, yeah, and it's always really funny is anytime I'm on a project that I know is complicated, and somebody goes, "Well, it's just this is really easy. You just do these three things." I just go, "Oh shit, we're in trouble." And yeah, there's a lot of pitfalls there. Like I said, 3.5 is pretty easy to do, right? Mm-hmm. That thing was created with the OGL in mind. It has its own SRD documents. You probably wanted to go and do another scrub, but even just given the fact that you've got so much more information from all three of the core books, and then you've got Unearthed Arcana that's in it, I believe. Yeah, Unearthed Arcana's in it. You've got D20 Modern in it.
Yeah.
You've got probably some other books. All of a sudden you're looking at, well, we need to take a closer look at these things, and who's going to do that? I mean, we're not going to take a designer off of it because we're in the middle of doing the 2004 version of the 5th edition of D&D. And so, and then you're not going to really want to trust an intern with it either. You want somebody who's knowledgeable, and that involves hiring somebody as a contractor.
Right.
And then it gets messier once you start dealing with 4th edition, 2nd edition, 1st edition, OD&D.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the stuff that you start talking about. We want to make sure all the product identities out there before we pull the trigger. Gary named everything, like gave everything proper names, just about, genericizing 1E for an OGL. I know that would not be a, give me 2 interns and a couple of afternoons and we'll knock this out.
No. And then unfortunately we've got the AI problem, which I wouldn't be surprised, given what Cox has said about AI in general, is, that's a problem that AI can solve in the next 6 months to a year. So let's just hold off, because we just tell AI to scrub all of that crap out, not understanding that.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. I asked ChatGPT last night which was bigger, 9.8 or 9.11, and it insisted 9.11 was bigger.
Yeah.
So
well,
we've got a while to go before I would trust AI to sanitize AT&T.
Yeah. I mean, the more I read about the current state of AI, the more I'm like, oh, wow, they just sent out cookie dough and told us it was a cake.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that's all crazy. But in the corporate world, at least even now, AI solves all of our problems. Like, it's just this magic box that solves all of our problems. And I think we're still going to have to deal with that in some way, in the shape or form, until it does something really screwy and everybody goes, well, screw this. I mean, more screwy than messing up Google searches, which it does a great job of.
Yes, it absolutely does.
I'm not a big fan of AI, in case anybody.
No, ChatGPT is fun to screw with for absolutely non-serious things. Like, I don't go to ChatGPT and ask it, hey, how do I fix the brakes on my 2018 Honda Civic? For all I know, it'll tell me to bolt fish sticks to the calipers, right? But no, it's not something that you're that you're going to do with AI, and I am kind of puzzled by these vague statements from Chris Cox about we're going to lean into AI, we're going to leverage AI on the tabletop. What do you even mean by that, dude? You're just saying words, aren't you?
Well, and in fact, he's saying words in a lot of ways to help bolster stock prices, because
absolutely.
AI right now is just, you tell investors AI and they think the same way. It's this magic box, and it's not, and it probably won't be anytime soon. But it seems like the tech sector now, in general, is really interested in trying to sell things that they can produce that don't make our lives actually better, right? But they'll hype them up. I mean, even though I see some really interesting uses of crypto, it was crypto. Virtual, the various forms of virtual reality, augmented reality, and they keep on kind of adding a function or two and changing its name.
Yeah, because Stephen, don't you know everybody wants to strap a 5-pound bowling ball to their face to try and play a video game?
I know, but it seems so dumb. So yeah, and I was watching. I forget what I was watching, but somebody said it's like once upon a time, tech companies were creating things that we wanted. Now they're trying to convince us that we want the things they're creating. And I'm like, I think there's a certain amount of truth to that. Of course, not all tech companies.
No. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Functionally, what's the difference between an iPhone 13 and an iPhone 14?
Yeah.
Nothing. No, absolutely zero.
But they really want the people that buy the new iPhones as soon as they come out. That's not me. I don't even know what kind of iPhone this is. It's a smaller one. I didn't like it when iPhones got bigger. I liked them because they were small. Yeah,
there was that brief bell curve when phone companies, Apple included, were starting to get into what they call them phablets.
Yeah.
Like phones with 6.5-inch across screens. That this is practical. This is useful, but no, I definitely think they're just out there creating solutions that don't have problems, and then convincing you that you need them.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I mean, maybe all of our problems are solved. I don't know. It seems like the world seems to be going pretty well.
Yeah. Oh no, everything's wonderful. Yeah. No, nothing's on fire. This is fine. This is all fine. This is all fine. But no, at this point as a gamer, I think the best thing I can hope for, and again, I bouncing this over to your square, and you can bounce it back. I think the best thing we can hope for at this point with tabletop games is that things stay the course, and that creators like you, and yes, creators like me, can keep doing our thing. We all live under the shadow of the ringed gas giant that we orbit, that is Wizards of the Coast. That we can keep doing our thing and keep enjoying it, and nothing terrible will happen.
I think one of the big takeaways in the last year is that big horrible gas giant is actually just full of hot air, right? I mean, they're doing the same thing, just on a larger level with more money. They are trying, with this new edition, they are going to produce a game that they hope that everybody's going to want to play. And it's very much based on 5th edition, which is a very popular version of the game. It's not my particular favorite version of D&D, but it's very playable and it's very popular.
No, and your favorite version of D&D is AD&D 1st edition. I know it is.
Right. And it's going to spur on, the next generation of game designers and content creators and everything else, which is fantastic. And for all of you out there who are big fans and love to, absorb the content, find the creators that really, really sing to you, play their games, support their product when it's something you want to buy, support their content when it's something that engages you. And if that support is hey, thanks, man, right? Great. If that support is, a little bit of money, great, fantastic. But if you've got a passion for these kind of games, we are living in I know Ben Riggs said the golden age of RPGs is dead. There's no such thing as golden ages. No matter what happens in this industry, people love these types of games, and they're going to create for them. And they're going to find ways to do it hook or by crook. So if you love these games, go find the things you love the most, support them any way you can, and sit around a table and have a great time playing the games that you love, or on that rare occasion that your buddy loves and you just humor them.
Well, amen to that, dude. And I feel like I think you and I are shoulder to shoulder on that Ben Riggs thing. There is,
I love Ben. I don't want to talk shit about Ben. I love his book. I love the guy.
Oh no, I know you're not talking smack.
Agree with him from time to time. So.
I know you're not talking smack at all. But I feel like, regardless of what the market says, I tell people when they talk about, I've had some well-meaning but perhaps short-sighted people say, if Wizards of the Coast just published AD&D instead, if they said this is the new edition, it would sell like hotcakes. And I'm like, it is not 1978, and it never will be again.
I can just imagine this generation with weapon speeds.
Right. Save versus death. You mean death saves, right?
Right.
No.
So a couple months ago, I played in Gen Con did this one thing where they played every single edition of the game. Well, most of the editions of the game. And Luke Gygax ran us through first edition. So it was the first time in a long time I played first edition. And I played the Wizard, and I knew I was in trouble when he started enforcing casting times, but there was no weapon speeds. And I'm like, fuck. Half of my spells are now not going to get off.
Luke, buddy, if you're gonna enforce casting times, you gotta have weapon speed in there.
Right.
You've gotta have weapon speed.
And,
Luke, man.
The fun thing about first edition D&D, and it was true back when we were playing it, and that was our favorite game, and it's true now as we go and we discover it, is nobody plays it the same.
Right. It is a common language divided by dialects.
Yes.
And the dialects will vary place to place.
And so, I came in, I'm like, all right, how are we playing this? And actually, the first couple of times, I didn't have casting times, and I'm like, oh, okay, I should be fine. And then when the shit started hitting the fan, he was like, what's the casting time on that? God damn it. All right. So,
always fun to have that strength spell. I'll cast strength on the fighter, and he can beat this giant. This will take a turn to cast, so it will literally not end the spell casting for 10 combat rounds. That's
But the game was fun. We all died in the end, laughing the entire time.
Well, there you go.
So not to get. I've killed Luke's characters in games before too. So
good. Keep doing that. keep doing that. So I'm really I'm really excited about Delve, and we've been talking about licensing and that sort of thing, which comes back around nicely. Are you going to open up Delve for third party?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm going to do it in a way that, so when this OGO thing happened, I actually wrote a lot on the subject. I helped the lawyers draft a very long response that Gritner put together, which I personally think it's long, but it was one of the best responses out there because it dealt with it both as this is bad business and it's bad legality. And then I know I wrote a piece where, to paraphrase, and I've talked to my lawyer friends about it. They both think I'm a little nuts and a little brilliant on this. To paraphrase Fight Club, a generation of game designers who grew up with licenses. I don't think another license is what we need. And so what I'm planning on doing is actually donating the mechanics to the public domain.
Wow. So you're just setting it all out there.
Yep. I mean, basically, so the way that I'm putting together the book is, in a way that, the stuff that's not being donated is in a serif font, right? That's the fluff. That's my world building. That's stuff like that. But when it's a sans serif font, when it's like, here's rule stuff, that's all being donated to the public domain. So you can play around with it, you can fiddle around with it, you can create your own adventures, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. Because at the end of the day, those mechanics really are not defendable because they're procedures, and
Right.
you really can't defend them. And so after a lot of thinking about it, and after everything that I went through, well, in parts of my career helping, the I'm not a lawyer, but I play one in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Is that's the solution I came to. So unless for some reason one of my lawyers comes up to me and says, "Stephen, we've been thinking about it, and this is the problem." The only problem that one of them has brought up to me, and he goes, "Well, I'd hate for you not to be able to make money on your work." And I'm like, "That's not. I can still make money on the work, right? Because one, we're still going to produce adventures. There's still going to be, what is considered intellectual property content that I will defend. But as far as the rules of the game go, one, I don't think I can really defend them, and two, I don't really think I want to, because I want as many people to be able to utilize those things as much as possible, and do that sort of thing. And plus, even though I present kind of a default system in it, I also, it's like, this is one small corner of one small world. This whole system is basically here for you to make the stories that you want to tell. There's a tone here that has to do with the thing. This is what I like. But at the end of the day, it behooves you, and I'll give you adventures and show you kind of like what I like to do with this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's your group, it's your friends, it's your story. Go out and use these tools to help create it.
And that is how all good tabletop RPGs should be presented.
I agree.
Unquestionably, you are doing it the right way. So that then makes me pick at you a little bit more. That would be like the most awesome place in the world for me just to hit the close credits button on the Steam Deck, but I'm not going to let you off that easy.
All right.
When can we get our hands on this? What does the timeline look like?
All right. Well, the timeline is as fast as I can get it done to the point in time that to the quality that I want it done. So right now I'm basically putting together the big book, and then I tear it apart for all those small books, because that's the smart thing to do.
Okay.
No, you can't. So right now I'm in the middle of chapter 4 layout out of 11 chapters. Now, that being said, chapter 5 layout is done. I just need to go in and tweak it, because I moved from Adobe to Affinity products because of their stance on licenses.
Yes. Yes.
and whatnot. So, but the art is done. The art is paid for. It's just waiting for me to place it. And so my guess is I'll have the layout done at latest by the end of the year.
Okay. So we're looking for a 2025?
Yeah.
All right. Right on. Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. And I have it on film, by the way, and I don't know if you know about contract law here in Florida, but you are now obligated to be back on my show, and at the very least, deep dive this game with us, and at the very most, run this game for us.
Oh, yeah. So it's one of the fun... I love running games, period. But, I mean, and partially because I love showing off the system, because there is that initial, when I give out the packets, this kind of like, okay, this looks different. And then about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour and a half into the game session, the light bulbs start going out. And somebody goes, well, wait a second, I can do this and this and this? Yes. Or I could do, and I'm like, yeah, and this works like that. Am I reading this right? Yes. You're letting me do this? Yes. It's all like, yeah. It's little things like I can cast 2 spells. I get 5th edition folks do that. Yeah, why wouldn't you be able to?
Right on. Jorge did have a question. Finally, I have a worthy question from the audience. Whose image is that when you're using as a background as your green screen there?
My green screen. This is one of my favorite stories. This is a piece of artwork for an adventure I wrote that was in Dragon magazine during the 4th edition era, called Winter of the Witch, and this was the first art order I ever sent to Wayne Reynolds. And it's still a piece of art that I really love. And I remember that after it came out, they're like, because Wayne doesn't do digital painting, he does practical painting. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, do you want to buy the original? And I really did, but I really didn't have the money to do it. So years later, after sending Wayne Reynolds all sorts of art orders, and Wayne is so much fun and just a great guy to work with, mm-hmm. I was asking him about this painting. And he goes, okay, Stephen, I got to tell you. He says, I don't like having my paintings around, and he usually sells them. And another adventure I did, my girlfriend actually bought me the original painting for it.
Nice.
And everything else, which was for Queen and Empire. And he goes, that painting I actually have hanging in my house because it's my wife's favorite painting that I did. And I'm like, oh, I was going to ask him if I could buy it, but I'm not going to take that away.
Right.
And I'm like, that is such a cool story.
That is a wonderful story.
And it really is. Well, all Wayne's art is just Wayne is the sweetest guy, just the nicest guy. And he is just incredibly talented. And so, I don't think I've ever seen a Wayne Reynolds piece that I'm just like, yeah, that's just okay.
Yeah, I got to say, I think over the years, I mean, I don't mean in an increasing level. I mean just over the years, D&D has been blessed by the gods of fortune in that they've had fantastic artists always, whether it was Gary literally grabbing Tracy Lesh off the street, 17-year-old Tracy Lesh, to come in and do like the illustration for the first Mind Flayer ever, or all the way up to the current year stuff. It's all fantastic. I mean, you've got the Art and Arcana set, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's a really, really fantastic book.
That is, stuff like ancillary stuff like that, I tend not to go gaga over, but it is really a capital I important piece of work when it comes to understanding TSR and Dungeons and Dragons and its history.
Well, and to give you a looking glass into like 15-year-old Stephen, I was living in New York City. I wanted actually to be an artist. I was in a bunch of art classes. I have a pretty good degree of art talent. Nothing compared to a lot of the artists that I work with now, but the art of Dungeons and Dragons, the art of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and the art of Dragonlance were always in my book bag, and I was always constantly, trying to figure out how these guys did this, especially as far as pen and ink work. Timothy Truman, I was always trying to draw like Timothy Truman. I was always copying Tim Truman. So just love that. And Russ from the Fiend Folio and back in those days. And I even bought Grimjack comics because Tim Truman was the artist in those, and still a big fan of that comic line. But it's always been blessed with really fantastic art. Well, maybe not always. There's a period in second edition where I remember not being happy with the artwork.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think
it was really good, and others were like, what?
I mean, I don't think you can do better than as good as definitely, but I don't think you can do better than some of the color plates that Elmore and Easley were doing for TV. That just just my 2 cents on the topic.
Although even, back in third edition days, back when there was actually an art studio, and like Sam Wood was working there and Todd Lockwood and Braun would come in every once in a while, and just being able to walk into a room and seeing what those guys were doing was fantastic. And that just doesn't happen in a lot of game companies anymore, right? You just don't have, you deal with, with artists on a freelance basis. So, but even today, working with Rick Hershey and Brian Snowdy, is I love getting the initial sketches, signing off, because I know that whatever I get back from those guys, I'm just going to be all like, well, that looks better than what was in my head. Thanks. That's fantastic. Thank you, guys.
It is always nice to say, yeah, it's kind of like a guy with a sword and there's a giant thing over here and that, and you're just like, this sounds terrible. What am I even going to get? And then you get the art back and you're like, oh, that's it.
That's really, really fantastic. And then it's fun to show my girlfriend, because she's like, holy crap, that came out really nice. And I'm like, yeah, they do good work. And working with the various art directors and artists at Paizo was a lot of fun in that way. There is no one more giddy in a game design studio or game company than an art director who's just gotten some finished art in. Because they're always like, look,
I can believe it.
And then, unfortunately, this building's not there anymore. But when I left Paizo, Paizo had bought a lot of Wayne's originals and it had actually started putting them up on the walls. And so you'd walk through the walls and it would just be like all of this Wayne Reynolds original artwork.
Wow. That is.
Now they don't have those buildings
Oh.
anymore.
So speaking of artists, I gotta ask you a question here, and I know it's getting a little late in the evening, and we could probably tales from old home. We could be here probably till dawn my time, but I do have to ask you: do you know Richard Witters?
Yeah, I worked with Richard at Wizards. I never worked with him directly. I more went out drinking with him after work.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Richard's a big fan of the show, and he has done. He gave me a sketch, dude. Richard knocked out a sketch for me, as I was joking with him about how D&D art was better when they were willing to show boobies, which I absolutely still 100% believe in. When I officially publish something, there will be booby art in it, but I digress. But he and I were joking about the Type 5 demon, the multi-armed snake lady demon.
Oh yeah,
and he actually knocked one out and mailed it to me. I have it somewhere.
Yeah, Richard.
Here we are.
An amazing artist.
I'm not even sure if this is if that's even going to show up properly.
Yeah, I can see it a little bit.
Yeah, but he just knocked that out for me and was like, yeah, I'll send this to you. He's a fun guy to just chit chat with, but
yeah, we could talk about boobies, like. Every once in a while, when I'm all for people trying to make the world a better place and expressing their opinions and whatnot, and making things less sexist. But I'm also a big fan. I'm a big student of history, and I'm like, you got to realize that this was like the 70s, and. People had just won the right to actually have publications with boobies in them, due to a Supreme Court ruling, and they were going nuts for a little bit. They were going nuts, and quite frankly, I don't know if you checked out the internet, but
I've heard there's a picture of a naked lady on the internet. I don't know if that's true, but
and so and so some of these. I don't know. I don't think proxy war is. They seem like it sometimes, and everything else. In the desire to make the place a better place, sometimes I think we attack the wrong things and let the real problems sit over there like an ugly scar, which kind of annoys me. It's all like all of the isms in the world. I want to fight until they're gone. but I don't think telling an artist how to do their art is how you do it. I think problems are like bigger than that.
Yeah, no, I think you and I are definitely in agreement on that. And I've had Errol Otis, Diesel LaForce, Darlene, oh gosh, who else? Of course, Richard. I've had so many TSR art. Tracy Lesh, she's a good friend of mine, on the show through the years. And it's like, you know, I don't want to go too far down the booby road, because I think, you know, it opens up too many opportunities for me to say the word booby. But, but I, you know, especially talking to Dave LaForce and Errol, it was never a sense of, you know, haha, I'm going to put a naked breast in the drawing, and more like, well, it's following the tradition of Greek and Roman art. It's just, it's a part of the human anatomy, and it is there. You know,
I remember that. So Otherworld Miniatures, which actually just shut down recently.
I know. Oh God, you had to bring that up. That hurts so bad.
I actually I've been a supporter of Otherworld Miniatures back when it was a website that was basically just, hey, look at these old AD&D and D&D Citadel miniatures.
I remember. Yeah, I've got over here. I bought and painted up the whole Player's Handbook cover Demon Idol. I've got one put together and painted up there. I even kit bashed a dead lizard man to go on the altar.
But the first line of miniatures, or one of the first line of miniatures, had a lot of monsters, including bugbears, and I've got these miniatures with junk, which I just thought I thought was hilarious. And so I get these miniatures, I show them to a friend at Wizards, or I show them off at Wizards. A lot of people are like, okay, Stephen, whatever. And I had one of my coworkers look to me and says, "Are you going to paint that?" And I was like, "Yeah." Paint the penis. And I'm like, "Yeah." Yeah, of course. I'm not gonna, like, what are you, the Catholic Church? Do I got to take a chisel to it? It's like, no. And so, and it always kind of amazes me the hang-ups, you know, mostly American hang-ups when it comes to like nudity. I have a miniature of a succubus that is topless, and I posted it on my Facebook page once, and I had a friend of mine's like, "Stephen, you need to take that down. You're going to get canceled." And I'm like, it's just a miniature of a succubus.
Yeah.
I think it's actually a pretty good paint job. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, if I get canceled for that, I'll just laugh my way to cancel town. I don't know. That just seems ridiculous to me. Like, if I did something absolutely terrible to another person, yeah, cancel the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
If I'm painting a miniature that is of a succubus that has her breasts exposed, yeah, I think you can give me a pass.
Yeah. No, it's. I think we're in absolute agreement with that, and I will spare you the story, other than to say that the succubus in the AD&D Monster Manual, the first edition, is ripped straight from the pages of the October 1977 issue of Playboy.
I saw that. Yeah, which you know, there's all sorts of kind of weird things that pop up that you go, why didn't I notice that? And probably because I wasn't reading Playboy when I was back then, unless
yeah, I wasn't reading it when I was 7. I found that out years after the fact. So.
Right, but it's all sorts of like little, like I saw a thing where Chris Perkins was talking about Soja Can, and the fact that the encounters in the adventure, Gary starts with the monsters that start with A, and then the next encounter is a monster that starts with B and C, and he just goes down through the alphabet, which I haven't double checked, but I'm like, oh, that's funny. Or the legacy maps that are in the Undermountain map, because they may fill in the Undermountain map, and things like, it's like, oh, I should have noticed that. Like, I spent so much time with those products that you would think I would notice it. But no, of course, I was preparing games, and looking at it in a different angle and whatnot. And, and little silly things. I just reread the first 3 books of Quorum, and I'm like, so is that where the eye and hand of Vecna came from? Like, did that have?
Yeah, I've wondered about that too.
It's like, yeah, they do kind of different things, but and I like talking to Luke Gygax about, like weird things that are in his game and theories that how they popped up, and some of which he knows, and some of which he's like. We're talking about as I was picking spells for my first edition wizard, I was looking at the Big B hand spells, and I'm like, yeah, why would I pick those spells? I can just get much more direct, better spells. I wanted to pick those spells, but I just couldn't. My power gamer in me couldn't do that. And he goes, yeah, he told me, he's like, I kind of wonder sometimes if the hamburger helper hand might have had something to do with those spells. And I'm like, that would have been hilarious.
I have pondered that myself over the years.
I wouldn't even have considered that. I take my gaming way too seriously, but it's, the monk came about because of that Kung Fu fighting song. And, and I know in my design, sometimes I'm really affected by what I'm currently reading or what I'm currently into, and finding neat little bits and pieces to sort of pull together. Of course, any amount of creativity is really affected by the other art that you consume, or just weird things that are in the, around you in the world that sometimes you don't even notice you do it. But and the amount of imagination and how much kind of things they pulled from just about everything, and game designers still do to this day. I've got 150 adventure. I've got the Eyes of Empty Death. There's like 300 rooms in that module. I had to fill them all with something. Like,
wow.
For some nights it's like, well, I don't know what the hell the point is. Like, and you sit there, and then something pings to your mind, and two weeks later you're like, did I take that from an old adventure that I wrote? I have no idea. I had to put something cool in there. I hope it's cool. I hope it's fun. I hope people enjoy it.
Yep. And I mean, that's the nature of the creative impulse. And, what can we do? We're like sharks, dude. We just keep swimming forward and we keep creating.
That's right. That's called living the dream.
Living the dream, absolutely. You too, audience, can make tens of dollars a year in the exciting world of tabletop role-playing game design. Just live the dream. Stephen, I think this is as good a place as any for us to call it an evening. Is there anything you wanna wrap up with? Anything you want to promote, point people at, celebrate, exalt, shout out?
No, other than probably a warning that, if Bill wants me to come on his show, I'll always do it because it's always just fun as hell talking to everyone here. But yeah, for the most part, except for the shows that I'm going to, I'm heads down. So if you follow me on Facebook and you wonder why I only post like 3 times a week, or you're like, well, that's Stephen said last week he was working on that delve. Where the hell is it? I'm heads down. I'm every morning I wake up at 6. Every night I go to bed at around 11. I usually watch a show in the evening and read some, and I do my crossword in the puzzle in the morning. But I'm head down working on this. But when I get to a point where I'm ready to release more, you're probably going to see a lot of it if you pay attention to anywhere on social media, and I'll definitely come back here to do a deep dive into it, maybe run a game.
Good. You damn well better. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the audience. Thank you guys for hanging out with us this evening. Thank you, Michael Dale, for the super. It literally helped keep the lights on around here, buddy. I appreciate that. Stephen, help yourself to some pistachios and bottled water in the green room. The coffee mug's yours too. So everybody, I'm gonna slide him out of here, and I'm gonna warn you folks about one thing though. Regardless of his game or my game, wherever you go, whatever you do as an adventurer, you best keep your damn eyes open for the dreaded owl bear. Love you all. Peace and good night.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere, in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around, some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle, way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take